I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. Last week, something disturbing happened in Tualatin at Hazelbrook Middle School. One student attacked another student, and other kids recorded it on their phones. The attack and the fallout are disturbing on many levels, and that makes it our big story tonight. First, let's deal with the fallout. Thursday, September 28th, someone took to Snapchat and threatened a shooting at the school. Police investigated and deemed it not credible, but a juvenile has since been arrested. The next morning, Friday, September 29th, an unrelated email came into the school threatening a bombing at the school and at staff members' homes and a shooting at the school. The FBI now reports that threat came from outside the country. But the school was evacuated Friday, closed for the rest of the day, and closed Monday as well. So what happened? Let's get to the big picture. We're able to shed a little bit more light on the entire situation, including how social media really helped fan the flames here. Again, it started when one student attacked another student in the hallway at Hazelbrook Middle School in Tualatin. We're not going to show you any part of that video, but we can describe it to you. One student walks up behind another, pulls her down by the backpack, hits her several times in the head and shoulder area before walking away. Video of the attack was posted on social media, where it spread quickly. By Thursday of last week, the comments started to get hateful. People started to claim the attacking student was transgender and that other young girls at the school were in danger. People started calling and emailing the school to complain, and some of them started making threats. Here's the superintendent of Tigard-Tualatin District speaking last week.
In this particular situation, we know that it was premeditated, that it was planned because there is a challenge that is nationwide relative to whether it's TikTok or other social media platforms. Go ahead and videotape a threat or a fight so that you can get lots of likes, and that's exactly what they did. Students knew that this was going to go down for that reason and did not report it. When our students do report it, we always react immediately to it. And so that's what's most important to understand. The minute that video, however, went viral, then there were issues that were raised by the larger community, not internal to the district, but external to the district. Adults within the community and adults nationwide, calling out the student's gender. And that had nothing to do with the choice that student made relative to the assault. That student made an incredibly awful choice and will have consequences that are meted out commensurate with that assault. However, this other piece, which is because the student has a particular gender identity, therefore there is no connection, and that is the hate that we are dealing with right now from groups from across the nation and even here locally, and that has no place in our schools.
Riki Smith says that, unfortunately, threats against her school district are fairly common these days. She also said that the attacking student has been turned over to law enforcement for an assault investigation. But we wanted to hear from some of the adults who decided to use their online platform to spread the video to people all over the country. One of those people is Ben Edel. He's a parent at Hazelbrook Middle School, but he's also the leader of the conservative group Free Oregon. He posted the video on his social media, and he does not have any misgivings about doing that.
They're also videoed every day, everywhere throughout the school. And so, I think it's really disgusting that Sue Reiki Smith, the superintendent of the Tigard-Tualatin School District, is trying to turn this around and blame parents. This is not the parents' fault or responsibility. The parents are outraged. The parents have been outraged, and the parents are still outraged.
Edel says he thinks the threats of violence against the school were hoaxes. He called them a false flag coming from what he calls leftists. He says he's not concerned that the spread of the video led to violent threats.
Well, violence has already been occurring at the school on a regular basis. And no, I'm really not concerned. I think that I suspect that the bomb threat came from somebody who supports Sue Reiki Smith. And that's why nothing's being done about it. I think it's meant to distract and meant to take people's attention away from the facts of the matter. And the facts is that a boy decided he was going to put on girls' clothes, and so he could go into the girls' bathrooms and girls' safe spaces and violate the safety of girls. And this has to stop. This has to end.
Now, to be clear, the school district has not and will not confirm if the attacking student is transgender because they are underage. That is certainly the narrative that surfaced online after the video went viral, despite no evidence that it's true. As this story was unfolding, we got an email from a former teacher at Hazelbrook Middle School. Jules Ackerman left the school at the end of last year, but taught there for 2 years. She was the building equity coordinator, so that's one of the people in charge of making sure the school is safe and equitable for all kids. She says at Hazelbrook, it was not an easy job.
The atmosphere, the climate of Hazelbrook's community is not all on board and doesn't prioritize the safety of those students at all times. And, there were times I can think of at staff meetings where people would push back on the discussion around using proper pronouns that students want, teachers who have walked out of those meetings.
And she tells us fighting between students was common at the school when she was there, and that students are using their phones to document and post them.
There have been many fights at Hazelbrook. I've been there for 2 years and there were fights. And I don't think it's a gender issue. That was my first thought, is why are these headlines talking about their gender? I've seen every gender fight at that school, I think that a big part of it is, the use of cell phones and orchestrated fights.
Ackerman says she wants to see more conversation around responsible social media use for the kids and the adults.
Talk to them about what it means to have agency over what you're seeing and what you're viewing and what you're posting, and being very selective and responsible in what we're viewing and what we're taking in and what we're sharing on the internet. I feel like these are conversations that are missing from schools right now, and at home. Because what we're seeing is it's the adults who are sharing these videos too. It's the parents who are sharing them to these, to Ben adults Twitter, and it's just disturbing that it's not even the kids right now, it's the adults. And so I think that we as adults have to do better, especially in education, especially as parents, to talk through this with our kids.
The school held a meeting for parents last night to talk about what happened, and more parents are planning to pack the school board meeting on Monday night. We'll be sure to bring you the highlights next week. Tonight, we continue to follow the 3-day strike against Kaiser Permanente. Our crews were at the Kaiser Interstate office in North Portland this morning and noticed a sign saying the vaccination site there is closed because of the strike, which ends Saturday morning. Kaiser officials told us today that they've had to postpone some non-urgent and elective surgeries to make sure that they do have enough staffing for critical patients. They tell us they've blocked out time in the coming weeks to try and catch up on the surgeries. As far as the strike itself, Kaiser says they are working with coalition leaders to set the next bargaining meeting. Yesterday, union members told us Kaiser was walking away from negotiations until the strike is over on Saturday morning. And since we love to give you context and deep dives on big issues like this, we've looked into the history of Kaiser and the unions. It's been rocky at times, but over much of the past 25 years, Kaiser and its unions really have been kind of a gold standard for how companies and unions can thrive together. Yeah, I did say that on purpose, thrive. Their unique partnership avoided even short strikes like we're seeing now and elevated Kaiser to a national healthcare leader. But obviously things have changed. Let's take a look back in time to get a better idea for what is happening now. Kaiser Permanente is a company that would have never launched without the help of unions. In the 1940s, after World War II, Henry Kaiser was going to shut down the system of health care for his workers. But the Longshoremen's Union said if he'd keep it going, they'd send all their members there. And the system took off. Over the years, several unions began representing Kaiser workers, and it's not always been an easy ride. In the late 1980s and into the mid-90s, there was plenty of labor turmoil at Kaiser, including strikes. In 1995, 27 local unions created a coalition to better coordinate their bargaining with the healthcare giant. In a Kaiser video, the founding executive director of the coalition recalls that troubled time.
This upheaval and the introduction of these concessions, not only at the bargaining table, but also at the workplace, became such a distraction to them that they felt that they were violating their commitment to quality care. And so the time came when we had to make a decision as to how to proceed.
In that same video, David Lawrence, who was chairman and CEO at the time, remembers what it was like to hear the union leader lay out a plan where the two sides could work closely together.
And he starts talking about this stuff, and I honestly had to fight to keep from crying. It was like, holy crap, this really is exciting to listen to. This is exactly what we had to do. And I responded by saying, look, healthcare involves teams. You can't do it without teams. If we're fighting with each other, we can't take care of patients.
So they struck a bargain. Kaiser would share financial information with union leadership, and managers would ask their employees for help solving problems. This recent article by Healthcare Dive spells out the details that help Kaiser become a leader in the industry in terms of quality and affordability. Those who were involved in the historic agreement back in 1997 said it made sense to cooperate.
They wouldn't help us as union members if the organization went out of business. So what they try to do is say, okay, let's sit down and strategize how we can work together, bringing the organization to the forefront, but also strengthen the union at the same time.
Although for some, it would take a bit of getting used to.
It wasn't as radical to us because as nurses, I guess, we collaborate. We have to on the units. We're collaborating with the physicians, with the LVNs, with the patients' families. We're used to working together. But I think what was radical about it was, wait a minute, these guys have been trying to kill us all for 3 years, and we're going to now try this.
But they did try it, and it worked for many years. I talked with Donna Warner with SEIU 49, a Kaiser union in Portland. Although she's now on the picket line, she worked as a medical assistant in 1997 and noticed a big change after that agreement.
Absolutely. After we formed our partnership, they really invested in those doing the work know the most about improving it. And we improved our patient care. We became, I'm losing my word right now. We became preventative focused in our healthcare and was helping people before they needed to go to the emergency room.
But now, she said, things are different. In 2018, the coalition, which represents 34 unions, broke into two groups, with 22 leaving to form the Alliance of Healthcare Unions and the rest staying with the coalition. It's the coalition which is on strike now. Over the years, David Lawrence left, and while other CEOs took up the banner of collaboration, union members say things have changed. Warner, who now works for the union, said the change started about 10 years ago.
The dynamic really started changing where we weren't working together anymore. Our voice wasn't being heard anymore. And quite frankly, the patient, what used to be in the center of our value compass, was no longer being talked about. And ever since then, it's been a steep decline in us working together and being able to resolve issues together.
I wanted to talk to someone from Kaiser today, but they did not have anyone available to be interviewed. But a spokesperson pointed out that Kaiser does have a long, proud history of working with their unions, that it's the largest employer of union-represented healthcare workers in the country, with 40 unions covering 160,000 people, and that 1997 agreement is still in place, making it the longest-lasting partnership of its kind in America. Let's hope that both sides can get back to the cooperation that existed shortly after that agreement took place. Coming up next on the story, the city's first mass encampment for homeless people has been open for nearly 3 months, and it's still not full. What in the world's going on? Blair Best began investigating, and it turns out not that easy to get a spot inside. Blair has details from the group running the site, Urban Alchemy, as well as comments from the mayor's office when the story returns. Portland's first sanctioned mass homeless camp has been open for nearly 3 months in Southeast and still not full. That's despite the very visible homeless crisis all over the town of Portland and beyond. We checked and 134 people are living there now, and there's room for 45 more. We're told that 40 people are close to moving out and into permanent housing, which is great, but it also means that more spots are going to be available soon. So why isn't the place full yet? A spokesperson for the mayor's office tells us only 5 people are allowed to move in each day, and people cannot just walk in. They need a referral to move in. But in order to get that referral, one of Portland's 30 outreach workers has to find them.
You know, I've called them up and of course take the name and the number and no calls back because I don't want to die out on the streets.
A California-based group called Urban Alchemy has the contract to run the site. Our Blair Best went to the site this week and noticed tight security at the gate, including one homeless man who showed up to ask how he could get a spot inside. The person that manning that gate told him he had no clue. He's just there to man the gate. Blair Best joins me now. Blair, what's up? What is Urban Alchemy telling you about this?
So Pat, tonight we finally heard back from the spokesperson for Urban Alchemy. He's located in California, and he tells us that they're working as hard as they can to get people off the streets and into the site, but that it's challenging. And I'll be honest, Pat, the phone call got a little heated. He pushed back, asking me, how I know that people are struggling to get into the site, and I simply told him that we witnessed it and we've talked with many of them, but he didn't really believe me that this was happening here in Portland, and he didn't really have a good, clear answer as to why that could be.
Huh. Okay. Well, what about this fact that only 5 people can move in each day? Really? Only 5?
Yeah, and that's because, there's a lot of homeless people in Portland, right? There's more than 4,000 in the city alone. And the reason for the slow intake process is they're trying to avoid overwhelming the site and the neighborhood, right? They're trying to avoid a long line outside the site. They're trying to be good neighbors. But on that point, the city is, quickly realizing that interest and demand for this site far outweighs its capacity. So they're quickly trying to open a second mass encampment, and they plan to announce the location of that site sometime next week. Now, as for Jeff McAllister, one of the homeless people you just heard from, the city asked us about him, and we're told their outreach workers are actively looking for him tonight.
Great. So maybe he will get into that camp. All right, Blair,
Hopefully.
Thank you. Great stuff as always. Appreciate it. Up next on the story, part 2 of our special report regarding sex trafficking in the Pacific Northwest. Last night we heard from a former prostitute, and tonight we're getting perspective from an undercover vice detective who investigates sex trafficking cases, the trends he sees on the streets when the story returns.
No kid wakes up at 5 years old and wants to be a prostitute.
Yesterday on The Story, we introduced you to a sex trafficking survivor who shared her personal story and message of hope to others who may be trapped in a similar situation. Here in the Northwest, sex trafficking made headlines over the summer when a woman was picked up from Seattle's Aurora Avenue and driven all the way south to Klamath Falls, where she was put in a makeshift cell. She escaped eventually, and her accused captor was arrested and is awaiting trial. That is certainly an extreme case, but not unheard of. Tonight, in part 2 of our special report, an undercover vice detective talks to Joyce Taylor about his line of work. We're not showing his face for obvious reasons, but he says sex trafficking is happening all around us. And even though parts of this story are focused on the Seattle metro area, this kind of perspective is something we rarely get to hear. And you can bet there are plenty of similarities between what's going on to the north and what law enforcement is seeing right here at home.
It's very pervasive. It's very common here, unfortunately. So there is a high demand in this area. There is a large supply in this area. And the Seattle area is kind of a hub of the Northwest for this type of behavior.
So it's not just people walking up and down Aurora. That's not really how prostitution works anymore.
With the advent of technology, we've seen a lot of trafficking and prostitution switch to online advertisements.
When we're talking about Bellevue, Kirkland, the East Side, it's online.
Yes.
And pervasive.
Yes. Much
more than people would imagine.
Correct.
So if I point to a hotel on the East Side, or maybe downtown Tacoma, there's likely prostitution going on in there.
Yeah.
What is the difference between prostitution, somebody who is a prostitute, and somebody who is being trafficked?
With prostitution, to me, there's a choice when you introduce a trafficker or a third-party exploiter. That decision-making ability gets removed from them. Abduction-based trafficking is less than 1%, what we see here domestically in the U.S., but that's what most people think of when they think of sex trafficking, that someone is abducted and chained to a bed and they're just this sex slave. When in reality what we see is that a lot of the victims know they're traffickers.
Some people may wonder, some of our viewers may wonder, why don't these young women just leave?
That's one of those things that's so easy to say, but in reality, for that person in that situation is extremely difficult. Many females in prostitution begin when they're still a minor. Many of them have experienced homelessness or unstable housing conditions, have experienced poverty. We do see a higher percentage of females of color, specifically African American in this area.
Who predominantly are the people who are involved in buying?
In the Seattle area, we could say with confidence, based on statistics, that a middle-aged white male of influence, college-educated, stable job, middle class or upper middle class, disproportionately buys females of color.
How is it such a big business and these buyers continually get away with it?
We have done a poor job at criminalizing the prostitution and not targeting enough the demand.
What's the challenge in targeting the demand?
I think part of the challenge is that a lot of the general public doesn't understand why we target demand. So most victims know they're traffickers or they're exploiters, they're familiar with them. Sometimes it's a family member, sometimes it's a friend or a boyfriend, right?
It's very complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very complicated, yeah. With a lot of people in prostitution, there's this overwhelming fear and anxiety about reporting stuff to law enforcement for fear of being charged or held criminally responsible for it. And then a lot of the times we've seen females want help. They want to get out of a situation, but maybe they don't want their trafficker or pimp or exploiter to be in trouble.
A lot of us drive down Aurora and we see some of these young women, and a lot of people are disgusted by what they see. Instead of looking at these young women through that lens, what would you like people to do?
Just realize that that's someone's daughter or sister or mom, and that realize that the amount of bad things that have probably happened to that person through no fault of their own. Disgusted is the opposite of what you should be feeling. You should be feeling empathetic. I personally, how can I make a difference? What can I do to help?
Why do you do this work?
I can't think of any other victim demographic for other types of crimes that police departments investigate who are more deserving of passionate investigators.
And by the way, we want you to know there is help out there if you or someone you know is being trafficked. You can call or text the National Human Trafficking Hotline. The number to call is there on your screen, 1-888-373-7888. Or you can text 233-733. An easy way, by the way, to remember that number are the words "be free." When those are typed into the phone, it gives you that number, 233-733. Well, that's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. But remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. The good stuff is coming your way right up after this. And boy, do we have a special big story for you tomorrow. You're not going to want to miss it. See you at 6:30.